Again, I'm Roger Anionson, and we've got the co-author of the books for our PCC classes, Michael Patterson, with me. And Michael is I think the brains behind the word mind ramp. I remember when we first came up with that word, and we used a metaphor of a ramp for the mind. And as it's developed, it seems to be more and more important that I tell people when they say, "What's the name of your consulting or your ideas?" And I said, "Mind ramp." It's like a brain ladder, only you don't have to climb straight up. It's a ramp that, if it's gradual enough, anyone can go up the mind ramp. Right. So how does that fit in with some of the new things we're doing?
Yeah, it's actually fascinating. Like you say, we started because we had to have a name, and my initials were, or Roger's initials are RA, and mine were MP, so we put them together, and it was ramp. But then as we started thinking about it, it's like, oh, a ramp, that actually works, because we're not talking about doing sort of this quantum leaps forward. We're talking about small incremental steps that get you from being where you are now, hopefully to a better place. So the metaphor is that the ramp starts out low, and as you're moving up the ramp, you're moving up towards health and well-being, and if you're sliding down, you're going the other direction. And as you say, as I've been working with more of these new ideas related to the larger concept of well-being, that includes both not only health and brain health, but also personal development and social, pro-social behaviors, I say, oh, you know, this actually works for the ramp as well. Because if you're working on these three different areas, what you're trying to do is take each of these areas, health, self, and others, and move them along this trajectory from, say, suffering and decline on one end through languishing. And we had this concept of just getting rid of the negative stuff doesn't actually cause positive stuff. It's a sort of a no man's land. It's where you're in between and you're not feeling much of anything, but you need to move it to where you're flourishing as well. So the ramp actually is a ramp that's taking you through these different domains of well-being, health, self, and others, but you're going from suffering up towards flourishing, hopefully. And
with languishing in the middle.
Yeah.
And if someone works with a strategy of doing what they need to do to move from suffering away from suffering, is what we'll say, you get to languishing. Using our ramp metaphor, at that point, I see that if they said, okay, I've made it to languishing, I'm good, they may as well be on roller skates. And as they quit moving, which takes effort, to do things so that you can get to that flourishing where you really are having joy in life, wouldn't the analogy allow us to think of you simply sliding back into where? Suffering.
Back into suffering, yeah. I've seen you do this on stage where you're sort of making believe you're on a ramp, and it's what happens. If you stop moving forward, the gravity will pull you back down the ramp, and that's what we think is happening. We talk about a spiral of debility.
Yes.
You get into this self-reinforcing, something goes wrong, you can't do as much, therefore, so the fact that you can't do it means that you're not exercising, and it just starts pulling you down.
And I've used the spiral of debility and came up with something I haven't even told you about, and that's that everybody can find more and more excuses not to do something because of the bad knee, because of this, because of that. And it gets harder and harder. So if you recognize that spiral is going to be harder to get out of, and if you're into then the suffering that's at the end of the spiral, the goal is to educate people to do something, a smidgen, and then two of them, to stay where you are until you've got the foundation and you've got your footing, then get back up to languishing, and then you make your choice and you dash toward the flourishing.
Yeah. So the constant little steps up the ramp towards flourishing is where we're going to go, and hopefully we replace this spiral of debility with a spiral of ability, and a spiral that where you're building a little bit each time in these different domains, and in the same way, it becomes self-reinforcing because you're feeling a little bit better. Once your health gets a little bit better, you feel a little bit better about yourself. It's easier to relate to other people. All of the pieces start going
and
together.
The science supports that once you get into the habits that are actually getting the architecture of the brain connected, it seems like it's easier to do, but you're actually exerting a different type of energy. You're doing it because you don't have to think about doing it. It's a habit. You can get into habits that are negative habits, and that's what Deutsch calls the learned disability or the learned disuse.
Disuse, yeah. Yeah. The final piece of the ramp metaphor, which I don't think I've told you, is when we talk about building strategies to promote wellness, we talk about actually taking an objective, chunking it down to a strategy, chunking it down even further into a tactic, which is a very specific action that I'm going to take tomorrow. Or, you know, you've scheduled a time, you know exactly what you're going to do. And you walk up the ramp one little chunk at a time, one tactic at a time, you know, and it builds you up that ramp, and they begin to accumulate, and so as a metaphor, that's what gets you up there. Building these strategies that do one little thing at a time, you're taking incremental steps, you're not trying to do anything in one great leap, and you're moving yourself out of this helpless feeling of suffering through this feeling of languishing and to a point where you begin to thrive and you begin to flourish, and then it all becomes a little bit easier.
I like the looks of that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Good.